He stood in the doorway with his suitcase packed and a lie already on his lips. "I need someone younger," he said, as if 5 years of love, loyalty, and shared dreams could be traded in for tighter skin and louder laughter. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She let him go. But 2 years later, when life stripped him bare and the woman he left her for walked away with everything, including his pride, he came crawling back. Welcome to True Love Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video. Now let's dive back into the story. The steam from the pot curled into the air, filling the kitchen with the warm scent of rosemary and garlic. Rebecca stirred slowly, the rhythm of the spoon against the ceramic pot a small comfort after a long day. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue on the beige walls of their modest home. Everything about the evening was ordinary, until David walked in. He didn't kiss her cheek like he usually did. Didn't glance at the stove to ask what was for dinner. He just stood there in the doorway, still in his work clothes, his posture stiff, his hands jammed into the pockets of his coat. Rebecca didn't notice the tension right away. She was humming softly to herself, absorbed in the moment, in the illusion of peace. Then he spoke. "We need to talk." Her spoon paused mid-stir. She turned her head slightly, enough to see his face. His jaw was tight, lips pursed, eyes avoiding hers. "Okay," she said, setting the spoon down gently. "What's going on?" David exhaled. It was long and forced, like he was trying to deflate his nerves. Then the words tumbled out. "I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be married." Time didn't stop, it shattered. Rebecca blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "What?" she said softly, searching his face for a smile, some hint that this was a terrible joke. But his expression stayed the same. Cold. Decisive. "I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time. David, we've only been married 5 years. "Exactly," he said quickly, almost with relief. "I don't want to waste another 5 feeling like this. Like I settled. I need something different. I need someone younger." Rebecca froze. She couldn't remember if she was still breathing. Her eyes stung, but no tears came, not yet. She stared at the man she had loved, shared a home with, believed in, and tried to find the version of him she knew. But she couldn't see him anymore. He was already gone. "Someone younger?" she repeated, as if saying it aloud might dull the sting. David shifted his weight. He wasn't apologetic, just uncomfortable. "It's not just that," he said. "It's how I feel. I need excitement. Passion. I don't want to wake up one day and regret staying in a life that doesn't fulfill me." Rebecca took a step back, her hand gripping the edge of the counter behind her. She didn't speak, not because she didn't have words, but because the words she wanted to say would never reach the man in front of her. He had made up his mind. He had rewritten their story in his head. 5 years of love, arguments, late-night talks, shared dreams. All boiled down to boredom and a younger woman. "Is there someone else?" she asked, though she already knew. His silence was confirmation. "Her name's Mia," he said finally. "She's different. Different. Younger." Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat. "How long?" she asked. 6 months. That was the second blade. Not just betrayal, but deceit, sustained and deliberate. He had kissed her, held her, slept beside her while living a double life. And now he stood here, in the kitchen they designed together, ending their marriage with the casual cruelty of someone choosing a new phone plan. "So what now?" Rebecca asked quietly. "I'm moving out tonight," he said. "I've already packed most of my things. Mia has a place." A hollow laugh escaped her lips, bitter and disbelieving. "You made a plan," she said. "You really had it all figured out, didn't you?" David looked away, his eyes grazing the pictures on the wall. Their wedding photo, the trip to Lisbon, the candid shot of them on their 3rd anniversary. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then his jaw set again. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Then you shouldn't have lied to me for half a year," Rebecca said, her voice sharp but eerily calm. "You shouldn't have married me at all." He didn't reply. She watched him walk down the hallway, his footsteps muffled by the rug. She didn't follow. A few minutes later, The front door opened, then closed. Rebecca stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of the dinner she had made for a man who never planned to stay. The silence that followed was deafening, not just the absence of sound, but the absence of the life she thought she had. She didn't cry right away. Her hands moved on their own, turning off the stove, wiping the counter. Her body continued the motions of domesticity while her heart began the slow, devastating process of breaking. The days that followed felt unreal, not in the dramatic, cinematic sense, but in the dull, gray weight of ordinary pain. Every morning, Rebecca woke up and forgot for the first few seconds. Her arm would reach out to the other side of the bed, expecting warmth, only to find the cold, crumpled sheets untouched. Then memory would return like a hammer, and she'd pull her hand back as if burned. David was gone. Not on a trip, not at work, but gone. And it wasn't just his body that had left the house. It was his toothbrush, his shirts, the leather jacket she once bought him for Christmas. The spaces he once occupied were now hollow, like pieces of furniture had been removed without permission. Rebecca didn't speak much those first few weeks. Her phone buzzed constantly, friends checking in, her sister leaving voicemails that grew more worried by the day. She let most of them go unanswered. The idea of putting her pain into words felt exhausting. What could she possibly say that wouldn't sound pathetic or predictable? He left me for someone younger. He planned it behind my back. He's already moved in with her. Instead, she moved through her home like a ghost, cooking too much food out of habit, staring blankly at her own reflection, lying on the couch at odd hours of the day, wrapped in one of his old hoodies she hadn't had the strength to throw away yet. She cried, but not always. Sometimes she just sat there in silence, the kind of silence that wraps around you like wet wool. And sometimes the tears came out of nowhere, at the sight of a coffee mug he used, or the sound of a song they once slow danced to in the living room. But slowly, things began to shift. It started small. One morning, she made the bed. Not because she was expecting anyone, but because the chaos outside her skin mirrored the chaos inside her mind, and she needed to control something. Then came the grocery list. A real one. Not just frozen meals and wine, but fresh produce, good cheese, her favorite dark chocolate. Indulgences she used to skip because David didn't like them. And then one evening, she logged onto her laptop and typed into the search bar, "Adult photography classes near me." She wasn't sure what possessed her to do it. Maybe it was the memory of that old camera she'd tucked away years ago. Maybe it was the quiet realization that she had been pouring herself into someone else's life for 5 years and had nothing left for herself. The class started on a Tuesday evening. She almost didn't go. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, engine running, debating whether she should just drive home and cry into another episode of a show she wasn't really watching. But she walked in, nervous, unsure, and more vulnerable than she'd felt in years. Inside the studio, there were other beginners, retirees, students, single moms, even a recently widowed man who brought his wife's old camera because he wanted to learn what she loved. No one asked Rebecca why she was there. No one probed. They all had their reasons, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a walking wound. She found herself getting lost in the light, the way it spilled across the wooden floors, the way shadows curved over a face. She learned about aperture and ISO, how to capture emotion in a still image, how to see again. Photography became her therapy. Not a miracle, not a cure, but a rhythm that pulled her forward. Week by week, Rebecca grew steadier. She decluttered the house, not in a dramatic, symbolic purge, but thoughtfully. She folded up David's remaining shirts, the ones he had forgotten or left behind, and placed them in a donation bag. She repainted the bedroom wall a soft sage green and rearranged the furniture. She stopped wearing his hoodie, and people began to notice. At the farmer's market, the flower vendor she always visited told her she looked different, lighter. Her friend Marissa, who had finally convinced her to meet for brunch, said she had a glow. Rebecca didn't deny it. She felt it too, slowly blooming under her skin. One evening, after her photography class, she took a walk through a park with her camera slung across her chest. She stopped at a bench and sat down, watching the golden light filter through the leaves. She took a photo of an older couple holding hands, their faces soft with comfort and history. It hit her then. She hadn't been mourning David. Not really. She had been mourning who she thought he was. Because the man who could lie to her for 6 months, the man who could walk out and say, "I need someone younger," without a tremor in his voice, that man had never really been hers. Her grief began to take new shape. Not as a wound, but as wisdom. David stood at the window of the high-rise apartment, staring down at the city lights below. It should have felt like a victory. The skyline view, the sleek furniture, the warm body in his bed. But instead, there was a heaviness sitting on his chest that he couldn't explain. Mia was asleep in the bedroom, tangled in the cream-colored sheets they'd picked out together at a boutique where everything cost more than it should. She always chose the expensive things. She said it made her feel like she mattered. In the beginning, he loved that about her. The confidence, the hunger, the way she grabbed life like it owed her something. It made him feel younger, more alive, more seen. She laughed at his jokes, posted pictures of their brunches, and called him her man in that playful, sultry voice. But lately, the cracks had started to show. At first, it was subtle. A sigh when he offered to stay in for the night instead of going to another rooftop event. A look of mild irritation when he talked about cutting back on spending. Then it escalated. "You used to be fun," she told him once, slamming the closet door shut. "Now you act like some old accountant with a budget spreadsheet." He didn't tell her that the budget spreadsheet was the only thing standing between him and total financial collapse. David had always made decent money. Not rich, but comfortable. He ran a small consultancy business and had steady clients. With Rebecca, things were manageable. She never asked for much. She cooked. She supported his work. They made joint decisions about spending. Mia wasn't like that. She wanted to be seen. She wanted designer bags, spontaneous getaways, dinner at restaurants where the waiter said things like, "Tonight, chef is inspired by Andalusian fire," and the wine cost more than a car payment. At first, he paid for it gladly. It felt worth it, a small price to shed his middle-aged mediocrity. He used the credit cards, then the savings. Then he dipped into his retirement fund. "It's temporary," he told himself. "The business will pick up again. This is just a phase." But it wasn't. Clients dropped off. Referrals slowed. He'd spent too much time being Mia's man and not enough time being David, the consultant. One afternoon, while she browsed handbags at an upscale boutique, he checked his bank app and felt his stomach twist. 3 accounts, all below $1,000. He said nothing. He smiled, told Mia the pink one looked great, and handed over his card. That night, he lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling. He wondered if Rebecca had ever felt this, the weight of keeping up appearances, the loneliness that crept in even when someone else was lying beside you. Probably not. She would have talked to him. She always talked to him. He missed that, suddenly. The soft way she used to say his name when she was half asleep, or how she'd start laughing in the middle of her own stories because she couldn't wait for the punchline. There had been a warmth in that life, a safety, but he'd traded it for fire, and now he was burning. The real unraveling began a month later. He came home from a meeting to find Mia sitting on the couch, legs crossed, eyes glued to her phone. She didn't look up when he walked in. "We need to talk," she said. A cold déjà vu struck him, like a slap of irony. He dropped his briefcase and sat on the edge of the coffee table. "Okay." She finally looked at him, not with affection, not even anger. Just boredom. "This isn't working for me anymore." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You're broke, David. You think I don't know? You think I haven't noticed how tense you've been? You don't take me anywhere anymore. You're always stressed. It's like, I don't know, dating someone's divorced uncle." "I left my wife for you," he said, voice low, stunned. "I gave up everything." Mia rolled her eyes. "You gave up comfort. You're not a martyr." She stood and walked past him, heading toward the bedroom. "I need someone who can keep up," she called over her shoulder. "Emotionally, financially, sexually, all of it." He didn't move. He heard drawers opening, hangers clattering. He heard her heels clicking across the floor, the sound of a suitcase being zipped. 20 minutes later, she was at the door. She didn't kiss him goodbye. She didn't even look sad. "Oh, and I'm taking my stuff, including that watch you lent me. And the cash in the envelope under the mattress? That's mine now. Call it a service fee." Then she was gone. The apartment echoed with emptiness. No footsteps, no laughter, no perfume in the air. Just silence. David stood in the middle of it, breathing through his nose like he might hyperventilate. His eyes darted around the space, the overpriced furniture, the untouched champagne bottle, the photos of him and Mia on the fridge. He didn't cry. Not then. Instead, he sat down on the floor, surrounded by the things he'd bought to feel young again, and finally understood the cost of what he'd thrown away. The knock came on a Sunday. It was the kind of soft, hesitant knock that didn't belong to a friend or neighbor. Not the confident triple tap of someone with a casserole or a question. No, this one was unsure. Hollow. Like the person behind the door was asking permission to exist again. Rebecca was in the kitchen, barefoot, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. The steam curled up toward her face, herbal and calming. She had been editing photographs all morning, finalizing prints for an upcoming gallery show downtown. A quiet Sunday, the kind she had grown to love. The knock came again. Slower this time. Almost apologetic. She set her mug down and walked to the door, her breath catching as she glanced through the peephole. David. She stared for a long moment, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. His head was slightly bowed, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket. His hair was longer. He looked thinner, smaller. She couldn't see his eyes. He wasn't looking up. She opened the door just wide enough to lean against it. "Rebecca," he said, barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. Not yet. His eyes met hers, and she saw the shame instantly. It poured off of him like sweat. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, the hollow kind formed by long nights of regret and restlessness. His skin looked pale, dry around the edges. The jacket he wore was frayed at the cuffs, not the sleek coat he used to flaunt with Mia on Instagram. "Can I come in?" Rebecca's hand gripped the door a little tighter. She studied him. There was a time when his voice would have undone her. A time when the sight of him on her doorstep would have ignited hope, desperation, or even longing. But that version of her no longer lived here. "Why?" He flinched slightly, as if he hadn't expected the directness. "Because I made a mistake," he said. "A huge one." Rebecca let the silence stretch between them like a taut wire. "That's not new information to me." He nodded, swallowing hard. He was shaking slightly, from cold or nerves, she wasn't sure. "Maybe both." "Please," he said. "Just 5 minutes." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, like someone walking through a church they once abandoned. His eyes flicked over the walls, now painted a lighter color, adorned with black and white prints from her photo series. The furniture was different. The plants were thriving. Everything was clean, warm, and alive. "You changed everything," he said softly. "I had to," she replied. "You took the old life with you when you left." David lowered himself onto the edge of the armchair, like he wasn't sure he deserved to sit. Rebecca remained standing, arms crossed gently over her chest. He looked around once more, then down at his hands. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "She left me." Rebecca raised a brow. "Of course she did." He looked up, surprised. "You knew she would?" "No," she said plainly. "But I knew she wasn't going to love you the way I did." There it was, the sting. She saw it land in his expression, his posture. But she didn't say it to be cruel. She said it because it was true. David nodded slowly. "I thought I needed excitement," he admitted. "Passion. I thought maybe I had missed out on something, that if I didn't take that chance, I'd regret it." Rebecca studied him. He looked like a man who had lost not just a relationship, but his reflection. "You didn't miss out on anything," she said. "You threw something away that people spend their whole lives praying for. And you did it for someone who didn't even know who you were beneath the surface." He winced but didn't argue. "I lost everything, Rebecca," he said. "The money, The apartment. My clients. Her. He rubbed his face, dragging his hands down as if trying to pull the despair out of his skin. And now, I don't even know who I am anymore. Rebecca walked to the windowsill and picked up her mug. Took a slow sip. The tea was still warm. You're someone who made a choice, she said. And now you're someone living with the consequence of that choice. He stood suddenly, as if compelled by the panic in his chest. I don't want this to be the end, he said. I want to come home. She turned to face him. Calm. Steady. Unmoved. David, she said softly. You left this home 2 years ago. You didn't just pack a bag. You packed my trust, my peace, my sense of worth, and you walked out with all of it like it was yours to take. He took a step closer. But I know now. I know what I lost. Do you? She asked, her voice colder now. Because it took being broken for you to remember what love looks like. That's not love, David. That's loneliness. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She walked toward him, slowly, deliberately, and for a moment he looked hopeful, like maybe the door was still open. But she didn't touch him. She simply stood a few feet away and looked him in the eyes. You said you needed someone younger, she said. You made that choice. Now go live with it. I'm not your soft place to land after the storm you created. His face crumpled, not with anger, not with entitlement, but with something deeper. Something hollow. I loved you, he said, voice breaking. No, she replied. You loved the idea that I would always be here. And now you've learned that I won't. She walked to the door and opened it. You don't live here anymore, David. And I don't live in the past. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. He stepped out, pausing on the threshold like he might turn around. But she closed the door. Gently. With finality. Then she leaned against it for a moment. Not to cry. Not to ache. Just to breathe. And then she walked back into her home, her sanctuary, her new life, untouched by regret and untouched by him. The gallery lights cast a soft glow over the polished concrete floor, reflecting off glass frames and gentle shadows of people moving slowly through the exhibit. Soft instrumental music played in the background, just enough to create atmosphere, but not enough to distract. Conversations hummed low, appreciative murmurs, laughter, the clinking of wine glasses. Rebecca stood in the corner, a glass of dry white in her hand, watching someone examine one of her favorite prints. A candid shot of an older woman sitting alone at a seaside cafe, light falling across her weathered face, eyes closed against the wind like she had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. This one's powerful, the woman said to her friend. It's like she's free. Like she doesn't need anyone's permission to be content. Rebecca smiled. She hadn't spoken, just listened. But the words settled warmly in her chest. They weren't talking about her, not directly. But they were. That image had been taken on Rebecca's solo trip to the Amalfi Coast 6 months ago. A trip she had once only imagined. A trip she had promised herself she'd take once she felt whole again. And then, when she realized wholeness wasn't a destination but a choice, she'd booked the ticket. She glanced across the gallery at her name displayed in clean serif font. Rebecca Graves, Light in the Quiet, a photographic memoir. Her first solo exhibition. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. She felt no urge to look over her shoulder or second-guess the space she took up. This was hers. Her work. Her vision. Her healing, printed and mounted for the world to witness. At one point, a man approached her. Tall, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. You're the artist? I am, she said, smiling. Your eye is compassionate, he said. You photograph solitude without making it feel lonely. She nodded, heart warmed by the precision of his observation. Thank you, she said. That's exactly what I was trying to do. They spoke for a few minutes, not flirtation, just human connection. He asked if she'd ever considered teaching. She said she already had a small circle of women she mentored weekly at the community center. I think there's something radical, she said, about women documenting their lives, especially after they've been made to feel invisible. He nodded. They exchanged business cards. And when he walked away, Rebecca didn't wonder if he'd call. She simply appreciated the conversation for what it was, brief, grounded, and real. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the last thank you had been said, she stood alone in the gallery for a moment longer. The lights dimmed slightly, casting a golden hue across the walls. She walked slowly through her own exhibit, letting each piece speak to her again, but from a different place now. A quieter, steadier place. She paused in front of one photo. It wasn't flashy, just a self-portrait, taken in a mirror, her back to the camera, her face turned over her shoulder, caught mid-smile. Her hair was loose, a camera strap across her chest, soft light pouring in from a window behind her. It wasn't about beauty. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about presence, proof that she had survived herself. She remembered the night David came to her door. His voice, his eyes, the way he had looked at her like a man begging the past for mercy. And she remembered how it felt to close that door. There was no anger in her now, not even bitterness, just a quiet clarity, the kind that came not from revenge, but from release. She had learned that closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's what you claim when you choose not to wait for someone to make it right. David would always be a part of her story, but not the ending. He had called twice after that night, once a week later, and again a few months after. She never picked up. The messages had been short, tired attempts at reconnection, apologies wrapped in nostalgia. She had listened to the first one, deleted the second. She didn't need to hear more. She already knew how the story went. Rebecca reached up and adjusted the frame of her self-portrait. Just slightly. Just enough. Then she turned off the lights. The gallery dimmed into silence, her steps echoing gently across the floor as she made her way to the door. Outside, the night was cool and still. The city hummed, not in chaos but in rhythm. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and walked down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks in a sentence that finally made sense. And when the wind caught her hair, lifting it just a little, she let it. She didn't look back. Not once. Finally, we have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more intriguing stories.